and forth between the White House and the special counsel. Is the president going to testify? So this letter to the Mueller folks saying, you know what, we don't think he has to.
His attorneys are dead right when they say they're not going to put the president in a chair facing Bob Mueller, because no good will come from that.
Our own Martha MacCallum interviewed Trey Gowdy, and frankly, that interview is still reverberating.
When he made the statement, the FBI behaved exactly like my fellow citizens would want them to behave. Really?
Here we are, day 500 of the administration.
Everywhere you look, there's Trump progress. He's there for the forgotten man and the forgotten woman, not the cranks on cable TV.
The anti-Trump media still pushing those conspiracy theories about Melania Trump's absence in public.
They are obsessed. This is just another symptom of Trump derangement syndrome. And when they haven't had enough of attacking our president, they move along and they attack his family.
There was a note in the door stating that we had a violation, a flag violation, excessive flag. We feel this is a patriotic act. It's about supporting our troops.
Well, Hall of Fame of Diplomacy is going to include one John Huntsman.
Ooh.
He's been an ambassador, been a diplomat all around the world for this country.
Yeah.
And now a grandpa.
Most importantly, a dad and a grandpa. So he was actually in Washington for some meetings
Right down there.
the other day.
He was like signing autographs a minute ago. So we're going to try to get him to focus on
Politician at heart. Yeah, but most importantly, he was here. There he is
Look
with
at that photo.
my daughter Isabel. It's hard because they're in Russia, so they don't get to see us very often.
That is one of the cutest photos of Isabel I've ever
She's
seen.
posing.
It's like that was them watching the show this morning.
That's
Appreciate
pretty
you,
cool.
Isn't that awesome?
Watching.
So he's going to be on later on this hour. There's a lot to talk about, Russia, North Korea, but also just hanging with my dad.
Yeah,
It's just
the
fun to have him back
Russians are
in
here.
town.
We want to dig around on your past, childhood.
Well, yeah, we're going to ask the hard-hitting
I'm ready.
professional and
I'm
personal
ready.
questions.
Yeah. Well, we should ask our audience. Is there any question you want to know?
friends at
Friends at Fox-
FoxNews.com. What do you want to know about
I don't know
Abby?
why I'm asking them that.
We've got a guy that gets to spend a lot of time in Russia on the couch. You know you got questions.
Well, that too.
Yeah. Well, there's also a lot of news to get to. Speaking of Russia.
Yeah, speaking of
right?
Russia. So, as you know, the Mueller probe continues. The president calls it a witch hunt. They're digging all over the place with what he calls those 13 angry Democrats in this investigation. Well, part of the back and forth is between the Mueller team and the White House in whether or not President Trump would ever talk to the Mueller team or have correspondence or answer questions, whether in person or written. Well, we're now learning, because of a leak to the New York Times, shockingly, that there was a 20-page letter sent from the Trump team to Mueller in January that laid out why they do not believe President Trump should have to sit down in front of Bob Mueller, laying out that ultimately he had the prerogative to fire Comey. He was constitutionally and legally able to do what he did. Ultimately, firing Flynn and Comey, not a crime. Intent also can't be litigated. He has what you think about what you did matters a lot less than what you did. And so it's a long letter. We read all of it. We're going to bring a tiny bit of it to you this morning. Again, this is from January, just leaked now. The Trump legal team said this: could neither constitutionally, what the president did, could neither constitutionally nor legally construe obstruction, because what that would amount to him obstructing himself.
That basically he has such vast executive power that he cannot obstruct justice because he could hire or fire anyone in the executive branch. The seeds of this argument really were sown by Alan Dershowitz and others who have been on Fox and other places saying that the president does have vast executive power. The question is really going to be, how far does that power go? And does it go so far that he doesn't have to deal with, say, a subpoena from Robert Mueller to testify? Because that would be fought in court, obviously.
That's what a lot of Democrats are saying, that this is a perfect example of why the president thinks he is above the law. Right? And
that's going to be the charge.
They're going to continue to complain about that. But then the next question is this ultimate sit down with Robert Mueller. Does it happen? Does it not happen? Because you can see in that letter, they're trying to find ways to say there's no reason for this sit down to actually happen.
Yeah.
And the president continues to be advised, from Rudy Giuliani to Dershowitz to others, that there's no benefit that would come out of you sitting down with Robert Mueller.
It could be a perjury trap.
Perjury trap, because even if there is nothing ultimately to hide and there is no collusion in the end between President Trump and the Russians, you could get down a rabbit hole. And you ask one question, as you talked about earlier, Ed, about a meeting with Don Jr. that then leads to something else, and something else, and then that could prolong the investigation even longer.
There also, as they point out in the letter, there has to be a legal reason, something material to the case, where you have to ask only the president. Only the president can answer that. And what you've explored through documents and other conversations can't get. So the Trump team is arguing, you've interviewed everybody. We've given you everything. You know everything. You haven't found a crime and you haven't found collusion. You don't actually have to speak to the president because you already have the answer.
Well, we're going to have somebody from Ken Starr's impeachment team during the Clinton days in just a few moments, breaking down all the legal and political implications here and how far does the president.
But there's a real frustration within the White House that there's been so much focus and so much money spent, as we were talking about yesterday, $17 million on this Mueller probe, that there's not been the focus on what the American people care most about, and that is what is being done in this country right now. I mean, we can list some of the things that have happened under the Trump presidency so far.
Right?
Tomorrow marks 500 day of his presidency. The economy, you see there, 3.8% unemployment, historic tax cuts, the fight against ISIS, the release of prisoners, the summit, of course, on June 12th with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, leaving the Iran deal, something the president promised he would do on the campaign trail, and he did, moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, and then, of course, the appointment of the Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Still a lot that needs to be done in this country when it comes to immigration and healthcare and things like that. But what the White House is saying, you listen to Kellyanne, and she says, our focus is on making the American lives better and making this country stronger. And people aren't talking about that because we've spent so much time on this investigation.
Bill Clinton faced all kinds of legal and political drama. And what did James Carville keep saying? It's the economy, stupid. You see this jobs number on Friday that even the New York Times said, we can't come up with new words to explain how good it is. Nancy Pelosi on the other side is saying this is just crumbs. This jobs number is not really trickling down to people.
It's that pile of doggy do.
Yeah, doggy do. Charles Payne was on a little earlier. He said just the opposite.
We went from 17 million to 12 million manufacturing jobs, and all the experts said they couldn't come back. Since January of last year, 350,000 have come back. There are Americans right now who are working that a couple of months ago, they never thought they'd ever have a good paying job. And now, you know what? You can go get yourself a $50,000 job, driving a truck, working in manufacturing. You can do something to help your family and feed your family. It's amazing.
I think there were, 25,000 construction jobs just last month alone.
What
Charles Payne is saying is such an important point, because when it comes to job, yes, it's providing for yourself and your family, but also it's giving someone a purpose, and it's reminding them that they can go out there and they can be good at something, they can give back to this country in some way. And so companies are hiring people that long thought they couldn't get a job, whether it's that they didn't graduate college
Great
or...
point. There's such dignity in work, in a good job, and that instilled in people, there's 350,000 additional manufacturing jobs so far during this administration, 2.5 million total. That list didn't even include the VA. I had lunch with two really good friends of mine who've been fighting for VA reform. What Trump supporters have had to do to get the Accountability Act, to get the Choice Act passed, is amazing. The deep state they had to fight to do that is amazing. It's still not over. So the overwhelming resistance continues, yet they plow through 500
How many times did Hillary Clinton say, Donald Trump's giving you false hope? These manufacturing jobs will never come back. The coal jobs will never come back. Some of them are actually coming back.
Speaking of fight, though, Pete, you had one last hour.
Well, a little bit, because turns out there's this candidate. He's running in Virginia's 10th district. He's a Democrat. He's trying to get noticed because it's a big primary.
And he did.
And he just watch the ad.
Dan Helmer. I approve this message. I'm different. I'm not a politician. I'm a Rhodes Scholar who served in combat. I'm for a Medicare for All option and against drug companies that rip off seniors. I'll fight the gun lobby to protect children, not guns. After 9/11, the greatest threat to our democracy lived in a cave. Today, he lives in the White House. No one, even the president, is above the law. Barbara Comstock has beaten every politician. I'm different.
I was watching your excellent interview when you were doing this, and your first question was basically something to the effect of, are you really comparing this president to Osama bin Laden? And he said, well, and he started going down this road, and I was thinking, the only answer is no.
Yes.
Like, no. The president is not Osama bin Laden. There's no direct comparison. I made some political, but there's no way to actually compare.
The problem is, he was behind putting those ads out there. He knows exactly what it said. The greatest threat to our democracy. They first say Osama bin Laden, and then now President Trump. And you pushed him back on that. You said you actually have to stand by that ad because you put it out there. So defend yourself. Defend what you're trying to say.
It was scripted. They wrote it. They knew what it was saying.
Yeah.
He went on, and the first answer he went on to say, well, it's because I swore an oath against enemies, foreign and domestic. And so I asked him, what are you implying?
So the president's an enemy?
Is he a domestic enemy? Well, this is part of the interview. Listen.
I served combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I did it for a simple reason. I swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic. And right now,
okay, so I swore the same oath.
President Trump swore the same oath.
Are you saying that President Trump is a domestic enemy? You're saying
I'm saying that
foreign
the oath that we took. I'm saying that the oath we took to defend the Constitution, I take seriously. This president doesn't. That change is coming. that no one, not even our president, is above the law.
He wouldn't. I mean, listen, he's running for office. He's going to be scrutinized. That's what happens. He's clearly a smart guy. He knows better. He's trying to get noticed. But to make that comparison and then to stand here on the island of Manhattan where 3,000 people died and so you may not like President Trump. You can resist his policies. You can be a liberal Democrat. That's fine. But to equate him to the worst Islamic terrorist in the world, how can you go any lower?
No.
Every time you think you can't, you do.
And insulting to all of those families that lost someone they
And
loved.
even Nancy Pelosi has had to disavow that. She just disavowed the last part of the ad, but they don't want to touch it because the
Why
hatred.
would you? Yeah, so you guys have been emailing us your thoughts about that ad, about that interview, and this is from Richard. It says, just another example of how far out of touch are some of the Democrats. No vision except tear down President Trump.
An email from Jay says his central charge is that President Trump violated the Constitution, but he cannot back it up with a shred of evidence.
By the way, I got an email from Peter Genova. He's a viewer here in New Jersey who emails me all the time about the show. He says, I'm a 9/11 survivor escaping from the North Tower 8 minutes before it fell.
Wow.
I am disgusted by your recent guest who compared President Trump to Osama bin Laden, all for the sake of politics. I suspect there are a lot of people who agree with that.
It's so true. I mean, don't say you're not a politician and then do what politicians always do, which is ridiculous hyperbole to prove some sort of a point and get noticed.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hey, well, he came on here.
He did, and he served our country, and we thank him for that. But now he's running for office.
Yeah.
So he's going to be scrutinized.
All right, a lot going on this morning. I want to bring you some other headlines we are following. Overnight, China warning that it will back out of any new trade agreement if the U.S. raises tariffs. President Trump has threatened to increase tariffs on up to $150 billion of Chinese imports. China's stance comes as President Trump's team spent the weekend in China for high-level trade talks. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross was the one leading those negotiations. And an off-duty FBI agent accidentally shoots someone while dancing at a nightclub. Take a look at this. You can see the handgun flying out of the agent's holster while doing a back handspring. When he goes to pick it up off the floor, the gun fires. A man was shot in the leg and then taken to a Denver hospital. Luckily, they are expected to be okay. The agent was then turned over to the FBI. And Google now apologizing after search results showed the word bigot smeared across a North Carolina Republican state senator's picture. Trudy Wade, she joined us earlier on the show, and here was her reaction.
It's not that surprising to me or my colleagues back in North Carolina. It's not unusual for us being conservatives. They need to have a procedure in order to take those images down when they're not factual.
Wade says the company still has not reached out to apologize to her directly. Stay tuned for that. And just moments ago, 3 astronauts touching down on Earth, the crew including American Scott Tingle, landed in Kazakhstan after leaving the International Space Station overnight. They are now undergoing medical examinations. Their mission ending after 168 days in orbit. A new trio of astronauts will now take their place, launching to the ISS on Wednesday.
Awesome.
Very cool stuff.
Yeah.
That's one of my dreams, is to go up to space.
I thought you were going to say to go to Kazakhstan.
I vote to send you up there. That'd be great.
Get rid of me.
We can do the show from up there.
All right, coming up, a question we are asking this morning. Are parents too often rewarding their children's failures instead of letting them learn from it? You lose sometimes, you win sometimes. We discuss the growing trend with our argument against why the president cannot obstruct the Russia probe in a 20-page letter sent to special counsel Robert Mueller and his team. Our next guest calls this a brilliant move that may have a significant impact on the probe. He is Saul Weisenberg. He served as deputy independent counsel in the Whitewater Monica Lewinsky investigation. He joins us now live from North Carolina. Good morning, sir.
Hi, Ed. How are you?
Great. I know virtually nothing about the law. Didn't go to law school. I don't want to pretend to be a lawyer on TV, and I don't want to spin this anyway. I want to get the facts from someone who knows more than I do. Before we dive deeper, what is your biggest takeaway from this? What does this mean, this letter?
Well, it's the leaking of the letter, which I absolutely believe had to have come from the camp of the president, that I think it's such a brilliant maneuver. Because it shows a number of things. First, it shows that the Mueller team's view of obstruction of justice is frighteningly broad, because he starts with 18 questions that the areas that Mueller wants to question the president about, and some of them are quite shocking. Like, what was your reaction when Mueller was appointed? Tell us about your conversations with Jeff Sessions about recusal. So that's very, very striking to me, because we hadn't known for sure whether these questions came really from the interpretations by the Trump camp or from Mueller.
Sure.
They're coming from Mueller. So that's number one. Number two, it shows the many efforts, this letter, by the president's team to get information to the Mueller folks. Not just, all presidents say, well, we've given thousands of documents. We've given millions of documents. Well, the relevant thing is, what are you withholding? Okay?
Yeah, what's the key thing we don't see?
Yeah, this goes into great detail about what's been provided and what kind of waivers of executive privilege have already been made. So I think that's good. It also discusses the evidence, and I think the evidence is pretty strong that it would be ridiculous to charge the president with obstruction, even if you could charge a sitting president. So I think all of that is good.
Okay, so
I don't think anybody's going to. Sorry, go ahead.
Pardon me. You say overly broad view by Mueller about what is obstruction of justice. Critics are saying this is an overly broad view by the president's camp of his executive power and that basically he's above the law. You say?
Well, there's one passage in there that I think they're right on that I don't agree with. They seem to suggest that the president, because he is president, can by definition never obstruct justice. And I don't believe that's true, and I don't believe there's any support in the law for it. However, they also say that the president cannot be guilty of obstruction for firing Jim Comey because it's within his power. That's a very different thing, and I think, and I've always said, that's a very powerful argument. Now, is this letter going to convince the people who think differently? No. But an interesting thing about this letter is they quote a case called U.S. versus Espy. It's the controlling law in the D.C. Circuit.
I've heard the president's legal team mention that in private. The Espy case is key. Got 15 seconds. Go ahead.
Right. Well, they're going to use that. What they're doing is sending a message that you're going to have a tough time, Mueller, on the executive privilege question if we go into court. And
because Espy, the ag secretary under Clinton, ended up getting off. So that might be important precedent here. Saul, we appreciate you coming in with some real facts. Interesting analysis. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Coming up, Abby's dad, the ambassador, John Huntsman, all the way from Moscow, and now to the couch. And a 30-year-old evicted millennial, we've been talking about this, finally moves out of his parents' house. Now we're asking, are parents too often rewarding their children's failures instead of pushing them, letting them learn from the failure? We discuss the growing trend with our parenting panel next.
Remember a historic 51-point effort in a devastating overtime loss in Game 1. The Cavs will look to even the series up a game apiece, to one game apiece before it heads back to Cleveland. It's a tall task. Well, we're still in Warriors territory. And victory is within reach for Tiger Woods today. Woods entering the final round of the Memorial Tournament, tied for 7th place and just 5 strokes off the lead. The future Hall of Famer hasn't won a tournament in nearly 5 years. We'll be watching.
He's still trying. Thank you, Pete. All right, well, it might make for a funny movie scene.
Strike 3, you're out of there!
There are no outs in this game.
No outs? How is that possible?
They hit until they get on base.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Let me ask you something. I mean, how do you even know who's winning?
In this league, we don't keep score. Every game ends in a tie.
Believe it or not, that is a trend. The trend of coddling our kids is growing in this country. You've seen the stories like that New Jersey high school allowing anyone to join the cheer squad regardless of their skill, and also a South Carolina teacher going viral on Facebook warning overprotective parents, quote, if you don't want your child to end up 30 jobless sitting on your couch, demand more from them, which sounds like 30-year-old Michael Ortondo, who just had to be evicted from his own house, his parents' house, by a judge. That really happened. Our parenting panel here to sound off: Ginny Zaino, mom and political science professor, dad and attorney Richard St. Paul, and Liz Stern, mom and CEO of DivaMoms.com. Great to have you guys with us.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a 6-month-old. I was telling you guys I cannot coddle her or snuggle her enough, but there will be a time where it is too much, and that is the debate we're having in this country. Let's start with you. We were talking about your son earlier, and he's a good baseball player, you said. How would he feel about what happened at that high school with the cheerleading squad if they let everyone on the team?
He would not be happy. He believes that the best should make the team, and those that work the hardest and those that practice the most, those are the ones that belong on the team. And I believe that too as a parent. I mean, your kids, not everybody should be accepted to every team. Not every child, when they're grown up, should go to Harvard. The best of the best make the teams. The best of the best make go to the best colleges. And we can't coddle our children and make them feel that everybody's the best and everybody should be on the team, because they need to know about hard practice, hard work, and what it takes to get on a team.
And you learned so much, Richard, through those failures. I mean, the best memories, not the best, but the ones I remember most growing up were when I failed. I remember I ran for class president in 7th grade. It's so embarrassing to admit on the air, but I got 0 votes except for 1, and it was my own vote. But you remember those moments, you put yourself out there, and you learn from it. But
And now look at you now. Right?
You know what? We can all
Not
learn
too bad, huh?
But it's failing sometimes that make us better, make us stronger, make us, I think, more able to be successful as we get older.
You know, Albert Einstein once said that you never fail until you stop trying, and that's kind of how my parents raised me. And the ideal of itself in that statement is that sometimes you're going to fail, but you keep trying till you succeed. You know, I think about one example in this country where we heard about the affluenza case with Ethan Couch, who he was pretty much coddled by his parents, no consequences, and because his parents didn't enforce any consequences on him, he ended up killing several teenagers, took their lives from them. And that's how serious this can get if we don't teach our kids consequences, if we don't let them know that it's okay to fail, but just keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to be careful that we say that's not going to lead to someone going out and shooting people, but the importance of parenting just overall with kids and how we can make them as successful as they can be. Jeannie, you've got 2 kids of your own. What advice do you give them?
I think it's the same advice my parents gave me when I similarly would try out for a school play and not make it. My parents would say, you've got to, stand up and try again. And you're right. Those failures are things that you learn from. They also are things that make you say, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I want to move in a better direction or a different direction, and that turns out to be better for you. Right. But I think there are enormous political consequences for this as well. And one of my favorite cartoon movies is The Incredibles. And if you remember, they're coming out with the second one, I guess, but this was a big theme of that movie, which was the evil syndrome was trying to say, I'm going to make a society in which everybody has powers and everybody is equal. And that was a major theme of the movie, was against that egalitarianism, was against the idea that everybody can be super. And even in that movie, you had Mr. Incredible, his son wanted to play sports. They had a bunch of lawsuits against the son because they didn't want him to play because it would be unfair because he was super. So it's a major theme that goes back centuries in terms of the kind of society we live in and how we develop.
You want to cuddle your kids forever, but they're going to have to learn to grow. I wish we could keep this going forever. Unfortunately, we've got to go to commercial break. But Jeannie, Liz, Richard, thank you so much for being with us and for being great parents. Really appreciate your perspective. All right, still ahead on the show, my dad, Ambassador Jon Huntsman, back from Moscow and on the couch. Cannot wait for that. Plus, the Trump economy is surging, adding 223,000 new jobs in the month of May, but apparently not good enough for Nancy Pelosi.
When you're being ripped off to the tune of $800 billion a year, how can you lose a trade war? Any ground you make up is a win.
This is not an insignificant point. This is really important, and he's right. I mean, we are on the losing end of 99% of trade deals out there. And the president has said, look, we need this to be more fair. That's why he's doing it. I think the markets have been back and forth about this because part of the investment community is thinking, oh, the president is just playing poker. The president doesn't want to ramp up fights with our allies. He's just playing poker because he wants a better situation for America. And I think there could be some truth to that. Even if he changes this a little, this is a huge victory for the president.
Why are people surprised? It seems like so many times they're shocked by the things that he tweets and things that he's wanting to do. He talked about this from the very early days of his campaign. He's never been a fan of NAFTA. He's talked about the fact that we are getting the short end of the stick continuously on the world stage. Why is anyone surprised?
You're right. I don't know why anyone should be surprised. He has been America first, and that has been his program and his mentality from the get-go. I guess people are surprised because they don't think that he wants to upset economic growth. And we saw great numbers on jobs on Friday. We continue to see an economy that is growing, employment almost at full employment right now. And if we were to have a fight, tit for tat, back and forth with our friends, where we're actually seeing dollar for dollar retaliation, then that could cut into economic growth. And I don't think people believe that the first business president is going to reverse what he's already put in place.
Well, the White House has said, Larry Kudlow and others, hey, we're doing this in the hopes that everyone lowers their barriers. We just don't want to play in a field that's so slanted against us because you don't want it to hurt the economy. But we saw these great jobs numbers this week. We've seen other great economic data. As partisans will do, Nancy Pelosi had her own spin on the good news. Listen, this is what Nancy Pelosi had to say about the job numbers. She said May's jobs report just shows that strong employment numbers mean little to the families hit with soaring new costs under the Republicans' watch. So good news is hurting people.
I have no idea what she's talking about with that quote, by the way. The jobs numbers are another indication that things have gotten better. They continue to get better. And whether you're on the low end of the income scale or the high end of the income scale, you've seen a better situation. By the way, some people on the high end of the income scale have actually seen their taxes go up because of the elimination of the state and local income tax deduction. Having said that, the economy is showing growth. The Atlanta Federal Reserve just increased its expectation for growth for the next quarter to 4.7%. Pete, we're talking about almost 5% economic growth. There is nothing that Nancy Pelosi just said that makes any sense when you're talking about an economy that's going to grow almost 5% next quarter.
Who's coming on the show?
Well, we got a great show coming out. We got the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, is coming on to talk to us about what we heard last week from Trey Gowdy. When Trey Gowdy said the FBI did everything right. We want to ask Devin Nunes what his reaction to that is.
A lot of confusion to that.
Exactly. And then we're talking about trade with Peter Navarro, who's really been on the leading edge here in terms of putting those tariffs
I'm
in
sure
place.
you'll ask. I'm interested if he's of the same mind as Secretary Mnuchin, who's been. It seems they're on different pages.
They are. I think they are. Pete, I think you're right. Mnuchin is more of a globalist, and Navarro is more, it appears, of, a hawk in terms of trade.
You don't want to miss. We're always good to have you on.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Got a big show
See
coming.
you soon. All right, some other headlines coming into our newsroom. I want to bring you those now. Newly released audio paints the terrifying picture of the moments after a car barreled down a youth baseball field. Watch this.
Respond to Robert Street in the area of the baseball field for a male that has been hit by a vehicle.
A 68-year-old man, Douglas Parkhurst, died a hero after pushing kids out of the way in that moment. Witnesses say a woman drove her car through a stadium gate in Maine. The driver, Carol Sharrow, has been charged now with manslaughter. She's seen right there. The motive still under investigation. Horrible. And turning now to a Fox News alert and a potential serial killer case in the state of Arizona. Police think a fourth deadly shooting could be related to 3 others in the Phoenix area. The latest victim, a psychologist and a counselor, shot dead at an office building. Police already connected the slayings of 2 paralegals to the killing of yet another victim. Prominent forensic psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Pitt worked on the murder investigation of Colorado child beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey. Remember that one? Police released this sketch of who they say is a possible suspect. And boiling lava now threatening a key escape route for hundreds of homes in Hawaii. Smoldering debris now blocking major roadways, cutting off access to neighborhoods on that big island. Officials issued mandatory orders for residents to leave. The Kilauea volcano eruptions began last month, evacuating thousands of residents and destroying dozens of homes there. And take a look at this. A volunteer firefighter proposes to his girlfriend at the top of the One World Observatory right here in New York City. The couple just finished the Tunnel to Towers climb. It's a long climb running up more than 100 floors. When he popped that question, she of course said yes. The climb is held in honor of New York Fire Captain Billy Burke, who lost his life in 9/11. And I have covered that event, the when you climb those stairs, Tunnels to Towers. When you get up to the top there, I mean, you cannot breathe. You're so out of breath. So kudos to him for popping the question.
The Tunnel to Towers Foundation, also something we've highlighted on the show many times. Frank
Fabulous.
Stiller, awesome work.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right.
Rick.
Wore her down. He wore her down. Got her all tired out.
He wore her
Couldn't say anything other than yes.
She had no choice.
That
He was like,
it.
fine, okay.
I know.
Hey, that's a theory.
All right, hey Pete. Yesterday I was talking about soggy air.
Yep.
You didn't believe in soggy air. All right, take a look at this map. It's kind of a meteorological no-no to show a dew point map, but where you see that dark green, that's where it's really humid.
Super soggy.
So the dew point is kind of a temperature, and when you see that 78 in New Orleans, it's really uncomfortable. Houston, incredibly uncomfortable.
So dew point is soggy air.
Dew point is the measure of the amount of moisture that's in the air.
Got it.
So the relative humidity is a percentage based off of the actual air temperature, and the dew point. The dew point is really how much moisture is
So
in the
how
air.
quickly will your shirt be drenched if you're in New Orleans?
Immediately. It's an immediate thing when that happens. But you notice 54 in New York yesterday, we were pushing 70, so it's really humid here. Drier air has moved in. In places like Kansas City, Dallas, it's getting better compared to where it was yesterday. So that's the good news. We do have some very heavy rain right around the D.C., potentially the Baltimore area today. So watch very closely after that. We could be looking at some localized flooding. All right. There you go.
Thank you
All
for
right,
learning
point.
me, Rick. I appreciate it.
You bet.
One day you're going to get it down. You're going to be a great.
Well, it's all part of
meteorologist.
building toward doing the best weather segment I can ever do. I'm just learning. All right, we're going to move on. A new report out says that after meeting with Kim Jong-un, President Trump could meet with Vladimir Putin.
We'll talk about that potential meeting and much more. I can tell you much more.
Ooh.
With U.S. Ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman. It is Bring Your Dad to Work Day.
Come on in, Dad.
Bring your dad to work. That's good.
Right. How are you, sir?
Good to see you. It's a pleasure. No, my foodie. Oh, my goodness. Sir? How are you? So, all right. I'm good. It was definitely an unforgettable experience.
You have no idea how cold that water is. That might just look like a lake that you dunk your head under. Dad, what were the degrees of that
Did you
water?
see my tattoo there?
Your tattoo.
I'm just kidding.
Russian water is extra cold.
That's an attention getter. I mean, first of all, it's a river. It's below zero, so it's not frozen because it's a moving river. And once you hit the water at that temperature, I mean, you lose control of your muscle. Your respiratory system basically shuts down. Wow. And I wanted to do the 3 dunks because President Putin got in and did almost 1. You're supposed to do 3 to make it complete. So I thought this is sending an important message when the United States can get in and do it the right way.
Did you beat him?
Well, I would say that the commentary in the country was that the U.S. did it right.
And it was snowing outside, so it was bitter cold, but there was a lot going on. And there was some news breaking 2 nights ago that was leaked out about a possible summit between Vladimir Putin and President Trump. What is the reality of that ultimately happening?
First, can I say it's a pleasure to be with you. I love my daughter.
What about us?
I'm so proud of my daughter. And but I have to say I miss your mom.
I know. My mom couldn't be here.
Back in Moscow. First of all, as it relates to any potential meeting, it would be a ways off, and the president at the right time will say what needs to be said. The White House will obviously make an announcement. But I think the president has stated before that he would like to get together with President Putin at some point and solve some of the issues between us. And that's a good thing.
And he said, going back to the campaign, that if you can have a good relationship with Russia, you could help solve problems in Syria, Iran.
That's right. That's exactly right. So to make all of that happen, you've got to have both sides willing to meet. Mm-hmm. And I think we've got both sides that would look favorably on that. You have to have a place, you have to have a time, and you have to have an agenda. Mm-hmm. And the president is shrewd enough where he would not sit down with President Putin unless he had issues that served this nation that were in line with our national interests. But it's inconceivable, Pete, I have to say, it's inconceivable to conclude that you can settle down the Middle East without the United States and Russia dealing with this hornet's nest of an issue called Syria. And it's inconceivable that you can deal rationally with strategic stability and nuclear weapons when both of our countries possess 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. Isolation doesn't fix things. It's coming together, but you have to have deliverables and results.
At least the president gave you a pretty easy assignment.
Hey, I've raised 7 kids, including some daughters.
That was tough.
If you can raise daughters, and I was reminded
can be strong-willed at times.
Can be strong-willed.
On occasion.
I was reminded of that this morning because my alarm clock was Isabel, Abby's little daughter.
They shared a room last night.
Yeah, Abby was kind enough to give me the sofa. And so at about 5:30 this morning, it was the cooing of little Isabel. That was the sweetest thing in the whole world.
Not too bad at all.
A reminder of what really matters.
What's it been like to be in Moscow, be in Russia?
It's a tough relationship, and we're bouncing along the bottom. And it's been tough ever since 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and the violation of international law by the Russians going into eastern Ukraine. And we've had civilian airliners downed in the case of MH17. We've had poisonings in the case of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in the UK most recently. So these malign events continue to play out. And the United States has a choice. We can either kind of let it all pass by and pretend that this isn't happening, or we can stand up and be counted. And the president has decided to stand up and be counted. Well, and it means that with that comes a little bit of blowback, but it also means that the president has, I think, some unique leverage in the relationship because the Russians see him with an economy that is performing like no other time since maybe the 1960s. with our gas and oil circumstances here in the United States. I mean, who would have guessed a few years ago that we would become the largest producers of oil in the world? We overtook the Russians a few
Sure
years
weakens
ago.
their hand, yeah.
Well, you have unique perspective, by the way, as former ambassador to China and Singapore, to this upcoming summit in Singapore over North Korea. So we want to get to that after the break. The ambassador is going to stick around, talk North Korea, and answer some of your questions. We've been getting them flooding in about Abby's childhood.
Trouble.
I've been waiting for this all morning. You have too.